Military veteran Claire Hamilton uncovers a hidden stash of money as her son Charlie has been kidnapped. She gets into her truck and heads out to meet up with the kidnappers at their requested location. She gets to the location first and hides her shotgun nearby. A van arrives, and 3 armed masked men jump out, demanding to see the cash. Claire demands to see her son as that was their deal, but the men have not brought her son. Claire raises her hands and throws the men the cash, but as they're distracted, Claire shoots one of the men. There is a shootout, and the men use the chance to escape, but Claire is hot on their tail. One of the kidnappers, Larson, had no idea about the plan to double-cross her and further learns Claire's son will be sold. Claire gains on the men and rams their vehicle before loading her shotgun with one hand and opening fire on the men. She manages to pull up beside them and shoot the driver in the head. She tries to run the car off the road but hits a snowy mound and overturns. Larson grabs the cash and takes off running, and a weakened Claire manages to hit him in the leg but is knocked unconscious by her car exploding. She has a flashback to the funeral service of her father, after which her son had started to distance himself due to the pain. A few days later, Charlie was kidnapped from home by a man who warns her not to tell the cops. Claire soon wakes, grabs her pistol, and weakly begins to track Larson. The injured Larson is still making his way slowly, unaware he's being tracked by wolves. He gets to an opening, but Claire has caught up with him. She holds him at gunpoint and demands to know where Charlie is, kicking his ass when he refuses to talk. Larson tries to run, but Claire easily catches him and suddenly falls through the ice. Larson watches as she struggles and thinks about leaving her but decides to save Claire. He then grabs the cash and knocks Claire out. As she lays there, a black wolf curiously approaches. It circles her before the two lock eyes, and it leaves. Claire builds a fire that night to dry her clothes and get warm, while Larson stops in the woods to rest under a tree. We then see Charlie waking up bound in a tent. He loosens his bounds with his teeth and sneaks out of the tent, avoiding the sleeping men outside before heading into the dark woods. He is making his way when he is confronted by a wolf, but before it can attack, it is shot by an old man, alerting the sleeping men. The old man turns out to be the leader of the men called Father, who is impressed that Charlie stood to fight. Charlie tells him his grandfather taught him to fight, but Father laughs at him. They haven't heard from Larson and the men and are worried he may have run off with their money. Father tells them to shut up and return Charlie to camp. Larson is woken up by the click of a gun to his head but warns that if he dies, Charlie will die too. He tells her about Father but is afraid to say more and takes off running again. Claire catches him, but the two end up falling over a precipice. Larson wakes phased at the bottom of the cliff with Claire sitting nearby, telling him they have been there for a few hours. Claire learns his name and wonders why he bothered to save her. Larson reveals he was not a part of the double cross and doesn't want to kill. Claire shows him a picture of Charlie, demanding his help to find him, or she will shoot him in the other leg. The two then find their way out of the canyon. Meanwhile, Father and his men are leading a bound Charlie, but Father is finding it hard to breathe. Worse, the black wolf is following them. Claire and Larson are making their way. He knows she is military from noting she is a good shot. Claire explains that the money in the bag is her family's legacy and all she has left from her father, but Larson reveals that the cash belongs to Father as Claire's father owed him money before he died. Claire tells him to shut up and drags him to his feet. They get to the outskirts of Father's compound and stumble upon the dead wolf. Suddenly someone begins shooting at them, forcing them to take cover behind a tree. Claire takes Larson's boots before tracking down the shooter's location. She circles around and confronts him, and when he tries to run away, a pack of wolves attack him and rip him up. Claire chases them off with gunfire before going to the dying man, trying to keep him alive as Larson comes over. The man dies in his arms, and Larson notes he was just doing what Father told him. Claire attacks him for knowingly leading her into a trap, but Larson denies this, telling her about the lodge that Father must have moved Charlie to. Claire lets him be, and Larson asks to give his friend a proper burial before they move on. Claire gets to the camp. She enters a tent and sees Charlie's scarf and knows she is on the right track. Larson gives his friend a fiery burial, and Claire insists they must move on. Father has made a camp in the woods for the night. He strangely treats Charlie well, offering him a piece of meat. His underling grabs the meat from Charlie, and without a word, Father slowly makes his way over to him before beating him with a log. Claire and Larson are trekking through the snow in the dark. She learns that once Charlie reaches the lodge, he will be handed over to a buyer. Claire angrily tells him to consider if it was his child, but Larson reveals he was the child at one point. The two continue on, hearing the pack of wolves not far behind them. They decide to make a fire for the night. There, Larson explains that when he was younger, his parents owed Father money, so Father killed his dad and took his mother and him as payment. His mother escaped without him and never came back. Claire wonders why he didn't run, but Larson had nowhere to run to. From the letter from her father, Claire thinks Father is not just after the money but wants revenge on her father. The next morning, Father stares into the snow-covered woods, trying to catch a sight of the wolves he knows are out there and are closing in. He wakes his underling Seth and frees Charlie, telling them to grab weapons as they will be fighting for their lives. They all stand huddled together, Charlie clutching a stick, waiting to catch a sight of the wolves. Father and Seth let off shots trying to scare off the pack. One wolf attacks Charlie, who manages to knock it away. Another then pounces on Seth as he is trying to reload, biting into his leg before Father manages to hit it. Charlie loses it and takes off running, and a wolf starts chasing him. Charlie gets to the edge of a cliff and slips, the wolf closing in on him, baring its fangs, but Father knocks the wolf over the cliff, saving him. Claire and Larson are almost at the lodge, wading through the snow-covered ground. An injured Seth is leading a bound Charlie, who refuses to be dragged and pulls Seth to the ground. Father notes that Charlie is just as proud as his grandfather. He reveals that Charlie's father once came to him begging for help, which he gave, but then Charlie's grandfather tried to drag him down and left him stranded. He notes that Claire is leaving Charlie stranded just the same, as she has not paid the ransom. They get to the lodge where Seth and a woman, Hobbs, are arguing about Larson betraying them. Father is enraged but doesn't plan to wait for them and is going to sell Charlie. Seth throws Charlie into a room, and an enraged father grabs him, telling him that his family's fate is to suffer once his grandfather crossed him, and he got rid of him. Claire and Larson are walking, and he asks about Charlie's father, but she reveals that he died in a bombing in Afghanistan. After his death, she redeployed to avoid facing Charlie and the pain he was going through. She regrets it now and wants to make up for the time lost. The lodge then comes into view, and Claire hands the bag of money to him, and they get closer. Hobbs and Seth are filling up a snowmobile to head out when they spot Claire approaching them with Larson as her hostage. She gets close, and they ready their guns. Claire demands to see Father, who steps out holding a gun and mocks her for thinking that Larson could compel him to hand over Charlie. Claire has Larson throw them the bag of cash, but when Father learns that the other men are all dead, he gets enraged at Claire. Larson tries talking him down, telling Father they've lost enough already. Father agrees, and Claire has them disarm themselves. Father calls Charlie outside, and Claire has him collect all their weapons and come to her. She warns them not to follow her and starts to leave. Seth shows Father a gun he has hidden behind him. He tells Claire that fate is not yet done with her before trying to shoot Charlie, but Larson takes the bullet. Claire then shoots Father, Hobbs, and Seth before escaping on the snowmobile under gunfire. Hobbs survives as the bullet had hit her knife. She grabs a gun and jumps on a snowmobile to chase after Claire. Father goes over to a dying Larson and kicks him in the head. Hobbs catches sight of Claire and opens fire but misses. Claire is trying to keep sight of her and stay ahead but ends up falling over a cliff with Charlie. They survive the fall and continue running on foot, but they can hear Hobbs's engine closing in as they get to a waterfall. Claire urges Charlie to continue running as she plans to face Hobbs. Hobbs charges at Claire, who knocks her from the snowmobile, and the two begin to fight. The two end up pulling knives, trying to slash at each other. Suddenly Charlie returns, trying to attack Hobbs, but Claire is forced to save him and ends up getting kicked over the edge of the waterfall. We then see Claire floating down the icy river, unconscious. Hobbs restrains Charlie. She is leading him back to the lodge when Charlie breaks free and tries making a run for it. Claire has survived the fall and weakly drags herself to the bank, passing out again. She comes to a few hours later, with wolves circling around her. She comes face to face with the pack leader, a large black wolf, but they show no aggression towards her. The wolves walk away, and Claire weakly follows them. Hobbs is trying to find Charlie, who is hiding behind a tree. She spots him from his icy breath, but he takes off once more. Father, Seth, and Larson are inside the lodge suffering from their gunshot wounds. The generator dies, and Father orders Seth to get it running again. Seth struggles outside with a lantern. Inside, Father tells a weakened Larson that the first child he took was Hobbs and he also killed her father. Larson was the first child he took who he actually viewed as a real child, but he is disappointed that Larson betrayed him. He comes over to Larson with a red-hot fire poker, telling him that he should have killed him a long time ago, the same as he killed Larson's mother. He then stabs Larson with the fire poker sadistically. Meanwhile, Seth manages to get the lights on but is killed by Charlie. Inside, Father reignites the poker, revealing that Larson made him weak and he must get rid of him. Suddenly, Claire barges into the lodge, demanding her son. The two charge at each other, and Claire begins to beat his ass. She grabs a knife, but when Hobbs barges into the lodge, Claire throws the knife into her throat, killing her. Father goes for his gun, but Larson stabs him and gets shot up. Claire sees the chance and pushes Father out of the window. She goes to a dying Larson, thanking him for saving Charlie before he passes away. Claire and Charlie leave the cabin to see Father laying in the snow. She and Charlie get on a snowmobile and leave. At that moment, Father stands to his feet but is quickly surrounded and attacked by the pack of wolves. 3 months later, Charlie and Claire are hiking in the woods. She then catches sight of the same black wolf, and the two stare at each other before moving on.